let's start in Washington right now with the big news, I should say, that is moving the markets right now, and that is trade talks with China set to resume next month. Eamon, what do you got here?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. The news breaking first last night out of Beijing, the foreign ministry issuing a statement. Here's the CNBC translation of the foreign ministry statement from China last night, saying that they confirmed a phone call between leaders that took place this week. And they say that officials have now agreed to hold the next round of talks in early October. That's expected to be in Washington, D.C. Now, look at the difference here, though, between this statement where they say they've agreed to work together and take practical actions, and the U.S. statement that I got from a spokesperson for the USTR last night. This is a slightly different statement. They're saying, the USTR is saying, Ambassador Lighthizer and Secretary Mnuchin spoke with Vice Premier Liu He of China on Wednesday night regarding U.S.-China trade talks. They agreed to hold meetings at the ministerial level in Washington in the coming weeks. In advance of these discussions, deputy-level meetings will take place in mid-September to lay the groundwork for meaningful progress. So the U.S. statement, more nuanced than the Chinese statement, Andrew, saying that there's going to be two tiers of meetings. The deputy level is going to be the first tier that's going to happen in the coming weeks. And then if that lays the groundwork for what they call meaningful progress, then they'll go forward with the ministerial level meetings. That could be in October. The U.S. statement not committing to a specific date or even a specific month. The Chinese statement saying that the meeting will be in October. So it seems like the U.S., if you read this, the U.S. side, Mnuchin, Lighthizer, perhaps a little bit more cautious here than Liu He, the Chinese vice premier who's been leading these negotiations on the Chinese side. The U.S. side seems just a little bit more reticent to commit to anything here.
Explain this, the motivation for being more cautious on the U.S. side. What is that about? Or to the extent you believe that the Chinese are being more aggressive?
Well, that's where you're into reading the tea leaves, and beyond reading the tea leaves into speculation, right? I mean, we don't know ultimately why the difference is, but I think it's striking that you get the Chinese side saying October and the U.S. side not committing to October. I pushed an official on that last night, right after this news broke, and the official not going beyond at all what was in the four corners of the statement issued by USTR.
I can tell you that the president thinks that China wants a deal very badly. I can just tell you that. He thinks that. And in this respect, I think they're kind of like saying, all right, but you remember April, and you had all these things you were going to do, and you didn't do any of them. Now you say you want to talk, fine, we'll talk. But it's if you're back to where you were in May, it's not going to be.
That statement was as much about.
I think he's saying.
As it was
I think he thinks he's turning this. I think he's turning in his mind. I think he's turning the screws on China. Hey, that puts us past that October date. I think it's all coming true, Eamon. That Xi, with the nationalistic feelings that are going to be around at the early October in China, it wasn't going to happen before then. So that gets us past that point where, as Eunice has pointed out again and again and again, they're unlikely to look like they're, changing or compromising or giving Trump anything prior to that October.
And notice that neither side is giving us a specific date here, right? I mean, we're getting a month from the Chinese side. From the U.S. side, we're not even getting a month necessarily. So there's wiggle room here for this to be a little bit squishy. Remember, we were told that the meetings would take place in September, and U.S. officials until yesterday had been saying that they were still focused on meetings in September. Now we find out that those meetings are going to be at a lower level in September, and then if that works, they'll follow up with a ministerial level meeting at some point thereafter. So both sides seem to be leaving a little wiggle room here on the timing, and it's not clear at all what the U.S. side means by meaningful progress and laying the groundwork for that meaningful progress. So what are the tiers that they have to achieve in those lower-level negotiations? We just don't know at this point.
And when they say lower-level negotiations, on our side, who's involved in that? Because remember, the last, quote, lower-level...
It sounded like...
Mnuchin...
Ministerial level would be...
I mean, Mnuchin, they left that meeting in China, what was it, a month or two ago?
Right, and that would be a ministerial level, right? The ministers would be, Mnuchin, Liu He, and presumably Lighthizer. Below that is staff at U.S. Trade Representative's office and perhaps some folks in from the National Economic Council as well.
Even at the ministerial level, you can't assume that any of these people are speaking for the two primaries. I mean, there are two people who are going to have to make this decision.
And there's no mention anywhere of that, right? The principal sitting down.
The trade war has been very tumultuous for everyone, and hopefully something good comes out of it. But in some ways, I'm going to miss where just the slightest comment can send us up 300 points. You know what I mean? It's like nothing happened, and but on the flip side,
it can send us down 300
I know
points,
it can send us down 800. But there are days where it's like, wow, that doesn't seem like a lot. We're up.
I mean, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on inside these negotiations, right? I mean, remember when we were in France last week? We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the president was talking about in terms of 2 phone calls from China. The president suggested that those happened. White House didn't offer any details on who called who or what exactly happened there. But that was enough to move markets, too, just the possible mention of a couple of phone calls.
The letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Obviously, maybe there were some overtures going on somewhere, and who knows what this? Who knows how positive this actually is?
The interesting thing that happened yesterday, I thought, was this, the big question around all this is, could this trade war expand from just tariffs into a broader economic confrontation between these two sides? The president was asked yesterday if he was concerned at all about the Chinese going after U.S. debt, that is the Treasury market, because of their vast holdings of treasuries, right, and selling those and to hurt the U.S. economy. And the president gave a long answer, which was interesting, but I think the important thing out of his answer was the president doesn't believe the Chinese have the power to do that because he believes there's enormous global demand for U.S. debt, and so therefore the Chinese wouldn't be able to sell treasuries. So the president is pretty confident here from his wording yesterday that there are some guardrails on this and it's not going to spill over into a wider confrontation. That gives you, I think, an interesting insight into his mindset as you go into these lower-level negotiations.
We were worrying they were going to dump debt when it was, 100 basis points higher across the whole yield curve, or 200 basis points higher. What are they going to do? And then rates are going to dump up. So,
right.
I mean, it's
a move by the Chinese that would hurt them as much as it would hurt us.
They could dump it into this quote unquote demand. So the whole thing.
I don't think Japan surpassed them already. Right.